If you can remember the last 3 weeks, Jesus has been in encounters with Pharisees and Sadducees and all kinds of different enemy types. And this is his gotcha moment. This is the gotcha moment. And it's interesting who comes to him. The Pharisees, who had no truck with the Roman occupation. They just disliked the whole thing. They were against it, but they were sort of cowardly. They kept a low profile so they wouldn't get into trouble, but they were not on the side of the Romans. The Herodians, of course, were Herod's people, and Herod was only king because Caesar said he could be king. He was a puppet king, and so they were on the side of the Romans. And here the two of them are getting together to go after Jesus. And then Jesus says, "Gotcha. Show me a coin." And they pull out a coin. The Pharisee especially pulls out a coin. And whose image? Caesar's. Whose inscription? Caesar's. But you're not supposed to carry graven images. It says so in the Bible, you know? No graven images. That Pharisee shouldn't have had that coin in his pocket. And on the reverse side of that coin, it said, the divine Augustus, the heavenly, the godly Augustus, high priest. Wow. Gotcha. I hope you appreciate. But I wonder how much the people for whom St. Matthew wrote the gospel appreciated this moment. After all, the gospel this was all written down 50 years later. And of course, the church community had expanded and become non-Jewish. They were Jewish converts still, but it was mostly Gentiles, and they wouldn't have appreciated this. Some of us think it's the beginning of the separation of church and state doctrine, but it isn't. It isn't. It's a gotcha moment. Whose image is this? Let's flip the coin. Whose image is Jesus interested in? Whose image is Jesus? Philip, when Philip said to Jesus, "Show us the Father," what did he say? Philip, "One who sees me sees the Father." Jesus is, as Paul says, the image of the invisible God. So we are into images. And St. Irenaeus in the 2nd century reminded us Christians that God is perfectly glorified when people who are the image of God, us, when human beings are fully alive, fully human. You know, the people that work with our heads, like psychologists and psychiatrists and all these people, they tell us that most of us are operating on about 45% of our humanity. That's about as much as we do in life. We don't really move into being human fully. I guess hopefully we will after the resurrection. And you know, a lot of the work of the church, the work of Christians, is to continue what Jesus was doing in his lifetime. Because Jesus is the image of the Father in his humanity, in his humanness, in his man from Nazareth-ness. He's not the image of God because he is divine. If that was it, well, God is God. But he was the image of God in his humanity, where St. Irenaeus reminds us we have to image God and glorify God by being fully what we are, fully human beings. And the work of the church through the centuries has been to make people, to help people to be fully human. It isn't about saying prayers, although prayer is part of human life. It's about being totally human. So this is high and lofty stuff you're engaged in. It's making humanity what humanity is called to be in this particular part of the vineyard. And it's also involving ourselves in blossoming as human beings, because when you go out of yourself to another, you are becoming more human. And all the effort and the work and the tiresomeness that goes into going out of yourself in various ways is what is making you and me more human, more the image of God. So this isn't about taxes to the government. Although, by the way, you'd be interested to know what the tax was in those days. What tax is he talking about? 1 day's wages. But we owe God more than that. We owe God everything. Be human in the image of Christ, because the only reason God came among us as a human being to show us for the first time what it really means to be human, to throw off our fears and our anxieties and our laziness, and to trust ourselves to the Father, no matter what He asks. So that's the message of this. It's not about church and state. It's about us and God. Not just you and me and God, but all the people that you will be able to touch in the years ahead through the work that you're doing today, which may seem very mundane and plain and ordinary and boring. But to lift up the human race with Jesus, because we are His collaborators. We're not doing this by ourselves. We are the collaborators with the Christ. And it's not the first time in history that God has called on a human being to help. Cyrus, the king of Iran, had just conquered the king of Iraq. And then he said, well, you Jews can all go home to Jerusalem. God was working through these two pagans, I guess you call them, to get His will in the world. And then He acted through Jesus to get His will in the world. And now He's acting through Jesus and us to get His will in His world.